Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello and welcome to the 26th module in the series Marketing Management, a VUCA perspective. We are discussing fundamentals and I am your friend and your tour guide on this fabulous journey, Siddhiprad Bhattacharya. As we go further into understanding how we have looked at marketing as a space, and we have taken notes from various dignitaries like Dr. Kalam himself, we understand that achieving that particular marketing dream requires us to be constantly looking for ways to solve our problems, looking at factors that can hinder us in achieving these. And once we have gained success, we want to replicate that success going forward. Marketing models come in very, very handily during that particular time. This is precisely where we have to ensure that we are never losing sight of that particular goal or that particular objective we have in mind, and are constantly charting our course correcting so that we do not lose track of it, and are always improving our processes so that we reach that particular goal better, sooner, and with more capabilities at hand than we had initially started out from. That is typically the role of any management principle, and it must define the way we are working towards achieving whatever we have set out to do. Improving and attaining better than what we had envisaged for should be a constant driving force in our approach to delivering better marketing output. With that in mind, we move towards the second aspect of finding out models that help us drive and measure market viability. And we look at how industries evolve and underscored the need for relevant models. And corporate success, like we discussed, is something where success has to be standardized. It has to become a norm. It cannot be left to chance. So that is typically the role for any particular marketing model that we bring into place and ensure that we implement over time. Here we get to understand more marketing models and a little bit of application through certain caselets. Now, environmentally, when we are looking at whatever is happening around us, especially with the VUCA context in mind, we have to notice that the scanning of whatever is happening in our environment is important for business performance and also the success of it. Business firms need to constantly look at what is affecting their entire work and business scenario. So you have to monitor what changes are occurring in the macro environment, the larger, the bird's eye view level of environment, where we need to find out what all is happening, and we have to constantly adapt to these changes accordingly, without which if we miss a step, it may be us plunging downwards. Therefore, business firms also need to shape the environment around them, and they need to create certain changes, and especially in areas such as social habits, technology use, and the overall economic outlook. Why is this important? Because it then brings the variables into its own control and helps make them more predictable, thereby being able to predict successes better. For example, in Thailand, small and medium enterprises have used information technology to conduct environmental scanning, and they are using this to make better decisions in new product development. Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank Corporation, which is HSBC, they have partnered with World Resources Institute to identify and quantify environmental risks facing the key sectors in South and Southeast Asia, and they have released 3 reports on the sectors of power, food and beverages and even real estate. In terms of European and Japanese companies, they are clear leaders with respect to managing environmental impacts. So, lots of research is going in this particular scenario, and a lot of organizations are managing these the best way they can with constant eyes out on changes. In fact, over 90% of prominent companies in Europe and Japan have developed policies in this area compared to about 75% in Australia and New Zealand, 67% in the US, and only 15% in other Asian countries outside of Japan. Companies in other Asian countries outside Japan thus need significant improvements in this particular area, and that is primarily a cause for concern. This is where we also need to buckle up and ensure we are delivering on these particular inputs. We are always constantly on the lookout for certain errants, certain abnormalities, certain new variables which pop up, and are adequately prepared to take care of them as we go further with our objectives and our path to achieving success. Now, we'll start today's conversation with a little case study from Maybank Group in Malaysia and how they managed their market forces. So, Maybank was a leader in financial services at that point in time when this case is written, and they actually thought of how Maybank's journey and core values would actually become important in the entire scenario. So, they were established in May 31, 1960, and from then Maybank Group became a powerhouse in Malaysia's financial sector, and they have managed to extend their reach globally with the extensive network of offices that they have and a diverse range of services which they have across the board. Now, the inception of Maybank was done in May 31st, 1960, but it also marked the beginning of a new era in Malaysia's financial services industry. Today, Malaysia is a huge financial hub in Southeast Asia. So, that is one of the major cornerstones of how Malaysia became a financial services hub, and this was devised way back in 1960. Now, the growth that it has seen from its humble beginnings, Maybank has today evolved into a leader of Malaysia's financial services sector and has about 2,200 offices outside as well in over 20 countries. So, the spread and the establishment of what Maybank stands for and its prowess across its global presence is something which gives a lot of credence to their capabilities as a large financial services provider in Southeast Asia with a global footprint. And that is typically how they have expanded and how they have made their presence felt. Wherever they have gone, they've also brought a lot of accolades home because of this entire very, very large spread that they've been able to carve out for themselves. So, with that, they have a fabulous workforce and customer base from which they are operating. Now, in terms of strengths, employees are one of the core areas of strength which Maybank has, because they boast a dedicated workforce of over 47,000 employees. This is a huge number, and all of these people are driven by the company's cause, so they are committed to delivering exceptional service, which is what people bank upon. Because when you go to bank with somebody, trust is one of the biggest factors that banks must derive out of their customers. At the time of writing this particular case in 2013, Maybank served an impressive 22 million customers worldwide. So this was one of the huge spreads in terms of both assets under management as well as the 20 countries they had the spread in, and 2200 offices and 47,000 staff. So very, very promising, very, very hefty numbers to work with. And their vision again was to be recognized as a regional financial services leader. Very simple, very humble, but very, again, to the point. And the mission was to humanize financial services across Asia and making them more accessible and customer centric. So this was the constant intent for Malaysia to achieve. So they wanted to be the regional financial services leader, and if you see how the mission plays out of that, the step they would take was to humanize financial services, which means they would understand what was it that the customer needed, how they could be of assistance to that customer, and across Asia make them more accessible to customers and keep the customer at the center of their entire business activities. The core values which would help drive that particular kind of mission was teamwork first and foremost. You've seen a large amount of people being on their roles. So they emphasized on collaboration and collective effort to achieve common goals, which means they would always look out for their customers and ensure that the customers stayed with them, they advocated about them, and the entire testimonial story would get more client customers to come along. Integrity was something which they kept at core because banking is all about trust and integrity breeds trust. So they upheld the highest ethical standards across all interactions and ensured they did not have any sort of malpractices besmirching their name. In terms of growth, they fostered continuous development and innovation as cornerstones to keep fueling their growth process going forward. In terms of services, excellence and efficiency was what they strived for, and they would get top-notch performance and operational efficiency, ensuring that people could blindly trust them with getting work done when it came to financial support. And they kept building relationships. So they cultivated strong, lasting connections with their customers and stakeholders, ensuring that the value derived out of whatever they did was something which rang a bell with their customers. So customer centric. Value creation, and here it is not just monetary value but also the trust, the goodwill, and the effectiveness, the efficiency which they get their jobs done. All of these things together would form part of the entire offering set from Maybank. Now, in terms of ranking, Maybank was the fourth largest bank in Southeast Asia by assets, and that by itself is a testament to its robust financial health and strategic growth. The group offered a wide array of financial services, including corporate and consumer banking, investment banking, insurance, asset management, Islamic offshore banking, which was more and more prevalent because there were lots of countries which had the requirement of Islamic compliant banking systems, and then stockbroking, venture capital financing, and internet banking. As of 2013, they had Malaysian ringgits to the tune of 560 billion in terms of their total assets, which was about 5 billion US dollars. This is 5 billion US dollars. And profits before taxation and zakat. Zakat is a term in Islamic banking which is a cess paid for societal upliftment. This is an Islamic practice. So, zakat is a cess paid for societal upliftment, and that was again 8.87 billion. Now, the return on equity was about 15.1%, which is what drove their stock during that particular point in time. And what helped them reach that kind of success was that Maybank had the ability to adapt to various macro environmental forces which had been the reason for its success. So, they were constantly keeping their eyes out for whatever was happening in their overall scenarios. They had looked at a lot of influencing factors. They looked at the social fabric, the economic movement, regulatory policies, and technological forces which were shaping finance in Asia. And they had significantly shaped Maybank's strategies also and how they operated, especially in the recent years, because they were keeping up with the times. Now, with all this in place, Maybank also noticed that there were a lot of demographic changes, which is why the introduction to Islamic banking was something that they thought of and implemented very quickly, especially in countries like Malaysia itself. They also saw that aging was a big problem, especially in Asian countries like Japan, etc. And this had led to substantial growth in savings and retirement plans, and now was the time to pay up. So, insurance came in a big way, investment plans came in a big way, wealth management came in a big way. All of these factors were an offshoot of the demographic change which they were constantly looking at. Also, in terms of how households were shaped and how households would actually run their business was part of the dynamics that they observed. So, they saw that the larger joint family structure was breaking up and the rise of smaller households was pretty much in, and both spouses would typically work. So, hence double income couples were pretty much on the rise, and that had resulted in higher gross household incomes, thereby increasing discretionary incomes which they could then spend on things of their choice or things which were taken up more at a whim. And this could be either saved or invested, and that is how they increased the assets under their management. Also, in terms of educational influence, you could see that the level of education and academic qualifications was also on the rise, and amongst the population they could actually see heightened awareness and understanding of the importance of saving and investing, which is what they worked back into the communications as well. So, because of this, they found favor with the audiences at large. Also, other trends that they were keeping a very sharp eye out for were urbanization and globalization. Because of urbanization, a lot of urban relocation was happening at that point in time, and a significant portion of the Asian population was actually moving from rural to urban areas, and they were also migrating from their home countries to foreign nations in search of better employment and lifestyle opportunities. Now, because of this, they felt that global presence was something which would work in their favor, and so Maybank responded by establishing branches throughout Asia and globally as well to support and serve customers regardless of their location. So, which means that a familiar face, a brand that they knew, trusted and banked with already was accompanying them and dogging each step they took outside in the world as well, and which is why Maybank had a global presence going further. Also, they saw that there were certain value shifts within society because they were funded by the changes in demographics, and these have reshaped Asian values in all, with a growing emphasis on efficiency, staying current with trends and family togetherness, because all of these aspects were now becoming of import for Asians who were working not within their countries alone, but also in other international scenarios. With all these things in mind, they also aligned product offerings so that they could tap into the needs of the consumers as well. So they gave a lot of offerings which were mapped to consumer needs driven by the demographic changes that they were observing. Amongst typical savings accounts, which can be simply called savings account, they offered a wide variety of savings accounts. Why were these options required? Because they did a certain amount of segmentation within the audiences that they were catering to. And when they did that, basis whatever demographic stage they were in, whatever they were earning, what their age was, what their exposure to world views was, they could actually put out accounts like a Privilege Plus account. They had an iSavvy account. They had a Save Up account, which was moving lower, and a Young Stars account, which was for the absolute entry level young people in the workforce. This allowed customers to choose plans that best suited their needs. So it was always mapped to consumer needs, and you created the necessary segments so that the offering basket was wide enough to look at various audience segments. They were very, very clear that the youth was the one they wanted to engage with, because over time these people would have a longer shelf life as customers, and they would also get more of their kind within the fold, increasing the customer base for the bank. So they introduced MyZone, which was Malaysia's first online banking site for teenagers between 12 to 18 years old, and the I Am Teen account, which was an online savings account for teens, which not only fostered financial literacy, but it also pushed the younger generation towards good banking practices. Now, why does one do all these activities if you're just in the trade for keeping money, getting some interest out of it, and putting that back in terms of the earnings? The reason is you are going to look at the lifetime value. That you can derive out of a customer. How much value is that customer liable to give you in the entire time that they bank with you? And in this case, because they are a bank, the actual number of products and services that could be offered was fairly large. And because the customer caught early in the entire relationship with the bank, were likelier to over time provide a lot of benefits in terms of monetary investments for the bank as such. So that is why the lifetime value became critically important for the bank to look at. So finally, in terms of foreign currency accounts, because they were looking at people traveling to various geographical locations outside the country as well, Maybank ensured that they kept foreign currency accounts and minimized the risk of foreign exchange rate fluctuations, which are available in over 10 currencies, so that they could play out with something called arbitrage. Arbitrage is the trading margin between currencies, and so because of arbitrage, they could manage one over other currencies depending on what level it was trading at that particular day. They also, like we spoke of, did segmentation very well. So they created these target segments where Malaysian residents with overseas sources of income and non-Malaysians employed in Malaysia benefit from these accounts, so that people stick around with them for longer. There is a huge expat community in Malaysia itself, and they found it necessary to cater to them as well, because they were earning and storing their monies over there. This included features like discounts on travelers' checks, and this gave them a certain edge when it came to having more valuable customers. For a longer shelf life. with the bank. And that's the reason why they could manage better growth compared to other players in the market. In terms of what they offered as value to the end customer, they always had what we've seen and heard and enough number of times observed, that they had a customer centric approach, which means that Maybank had a variety of financial products catering to a wide variety of segments and their needs, and these services also were offered to diverse members of its customer base, ensuring personalized and efficient solutions. But beyond that, they also ensured that the customers felt participative in the entire process. So, with their inputs, the customers felt that their needs were truly understood and appreciated by Maybank, which is why their trust and goodwill earned Maybank a longer shelf life and a longer term with their bank as banking customers. Again, in terms of looking at global competitiveness, the bank's strategic initiatives and adaptations made it a formidable player and gave it that position in the global financial arena. They kept up their banking systems in sync with diverse demographic needs. So, they maintained a fantastic international presence and offering set, and at the same point in time, what they also did was they tailored solutions for segments, large enough segments. For example, Islamic banking. So, in all, Maybank managed to keep tabs on all environmental factors in its entire operating space. So, it looked at global presence, consumer segments, process finesse, and communications and feedback in a large way to ensure that they had all these points tied down very, very neatly. And that is why their successful adaptation to social and economic changes solidified its position as a leader in the financial services sector, especially for Malaysians and expats as well. Where does this take that organization with such a very, very nicely devised methodology of approaching its subject matter of expertise? So, with continuous growth and innovation, now Maybank aims to maintain its leadership stance and expand its influence in the financial services industry, embodying its mission to humanize financial services across Asia, and the expansion format keeps going from there on in that particular direction. So, that is about the case of Maybank, always keeping tabs on its environmental scenarios, its consumer segments, putting in processes which maps the needs of all these segments and gives them specific, almost tailored solutions, which helps the consumer feel participative and feels that they are the consumer feels that they are heard, they are catered to very, very well. and that communication and feedback that they have probably left at the desk of Maybank has been appreciated and acted upon. So, all of these factors together, they help define how Maybank has very successfully managed to run its capabilities out there in the market and ensure that consumers also saw it in that particular light. So, there are various models that can help you look at your space in which you operate in the business scenario. And one of these models which we will look today at is the PESTEL format. PESTEL is an acronym. We will see what it stands for, and we will try and understand how and what it has on offer, so that as marketers we can help our entire business thinking to improve its process by looking at certain yardsticks. Those yardsticks will help us define what aspects affect our entire movement going further. So, let us try and understand PESTEL analysis. In some places you will also see this acronym spelt as PESTEL analysis or PESTEL analysis. It's one and the same thing, but the acronym is more important and it stands for certain aspects of what it does. So, it is a comprehensive tool for strategic business planning, and the PESTEL analysis is a strategic tool that is used to understand the external macro environmental factors that might affect an organization, which definitely puts it in the VUCA bucket. Why? Because macro environmental factors are large, sweep across economies and regions and affect industries as well. So, which is why at the large market forces level, we need to understand the factors which help define what PESTEL forces are working, and so that analysis is something which works very well for business thinkers and definitely marketing thinkers. So, here is PESTEL analysis, an overview of the same. As you can see, it stands for various elements which form the entire acronym. So, P is political, E is economic, S is social, T is tech, the second E is environmental, and the last L is obviously legal. So, each has its own devised set of offerings within it, and you need to look at various things which affect one large pedestal. So, when you look at political, you look at government policy. What is the government got to do with that particular industry, its ancillary sectors, what policy are they driving, how will it affect trade, will it affect the certain kind of margins they are making, will it affect the way they are able to communicate about it. So, government policy is a very large role. Also, how likely is it to change? So, therefore, political stability. So, will it change today, tomorrow, in 10 years, in 50 years? Nobody knows. However, the situation is stable, the better you are at planning your business moves. If the position is very volatile, then you never know which new government will bring in what particular change to that entire scenario. Then, what kind of corruption exists? If there is corruption, how badly does it affect the industry and the business as such? Then, foreign trade policy, whether the organization is affected because of the foreign trade of that particular geography, whether it be domestic or international. Then there is a certain tax policy, how much will they have to shell out in terms of taxes for the services or products that they engage in delivering. Then what labor law restrictions are there so that they know exactly how to deal with their workforce, and any trade restrictions which exist in that particular space. Economically, how is the economy doing? Is it growing? Is it lagging? Is it suffocating? Does it have inflation? The various things that affect that particular conversation can be looked at from economic growth aspects. Exchange rates, how is the currency doing? Are they going to get better prices for what they produce? Then interest rates, how well can they actually finance their entire enterprise? Inflation rates, are people likely to buy of that particular service, or is it seen as too costly? Is there enough disposable income in people's pockets? And how many people are employed? Are there enough people who have a steady income to be able to manage paying for the goods and services? All of these things form the economic scenario. Then you've got the social angle, where are there enough people to begin with? So, population growth rate, your age distribution, how many paying, working, able-bodied, able and sound mind-bodied people are there who can actually invest in your products and services. Career attitudes, are people really focused on having a great career, earning money and spending it properly, saving up and investing, etc. Then how much do they put an emphasis on safety? Are they conscious about their health and lifestyles? And finally, are there any cultural barriers? Now, very interestingly, in the case of Islamic banking, if we take that as an example, so Islamic banking has a problem with interest, which is a no-no. But then there is a certain amount of compounding that is the cornerstone of banking. How does this compounding factor get brought in if interest by itself is negated in the Islamic function? Calculation of compounding by adding a fee is what is put in as a processing charge to the entire activity, and that by proper legal representation takes up the loss which is lost due to not incorporating interest. It is calculated as a certain activity cost over a certain period of time. This is again something which goes along with the scriptural requirements of Islamic banking and falls into line with the requirements of the culture. So, the lot of things which work towards ensuring that business as usual keeps going on, while you also meet the necessary requirements and do not break cultural barriers. Now, in terms of technological incentives, is it going to help you and be more disruptive and favorable for you? What is the level of innovation? How much are people actually focused on creating something which is a new, better, sharper, smoother, quicker, cheaper way of doing things? Then automation, how many problems are automated and solved before they even hit your desk? R&D in case of developing new things. Technological change, how fast is it happening and how much people are aware of technological changes. So, the awareness quotient itself is something which becomes very, very important for planners and business strategists and marketing thinkers to actually keep tabs on. So, all of these things come into play. Then you have got the environmental factors, because you have to leave behind a world which is crucially important more and more in today's day and age. So, hence weather, climate change, environmental policies and pressures from various action groups like NGOs are critical to be taken note of, so that you do not fall afoul of them. And if you do, you also tend to have a chance of falling afoul of the law. So, is there any discrimination by law? Are there any antitrusts, whether you are monopolizing that particular market? Are there any employment laws that you need to be careful about? Are the consumers protected by certain laws and you may stand a chance of falling afoul of them? There are copyright and patent laws ensuring you have access to your intellectual property. And finally, health and safety laws, which ensure you run in a particular direction without causing harm to people around you. So, a lot of factors like these come into play when we look at the environment within which businesses operate, and clubbing them under each of these acronym led segments helps you put a structural thought process and align which particular aspects are parked under which particular header. Also, at a later stage, this exact same thing is where you've got specific experts who address that kind of a problem. So, for political problems, you try and speak with lobbyists wherever it is legal to do so. For economic aspects, you speak with economists and analysts to ensure these parts are taken care of. Socially, you speak with communicators to ensure the right kind of messaging goes out. Technology wise, you speak with R&D and ITES personnel to engineer something which is applicable in that particular scenario. For environmental considerations, you look at environmental engineering and studies, and for the legal part, you look at lawyers to ensure that they are taking care of these aspects for you. So, it is easier to divide the work up into very directed departments within the organization once you know exactly where you have clubbed what particular aspect of the workings of business in that industry, in that particular geography and particular economy. Now, with that in mind, political factors are typically the impact of government policies which we have spoken of. Political stability is a factor which we have spoken of, and any other regulations that may impact the running or impediments to business in that particular geography. Tax policies can help understand how tax laws can give you better business profitability or the reverse of it. Trade tariffs showcase how the impact of tariffs work on international trade. For example, there is a US-China trade war going on, and when Trump comes into power, he has said that he can apply anything between a 60% to a 150% tariff on Chinese made products and services, which is going to offset the balance in the US's favor. Now, it is obviously to be seen, and Trump is yet to take office, but the announcement of these kind of scenarios opens up the opportunity for other organizations working from different other economies and not Chinese, where they can now have a fighting chance and pip China's companies off the perch which they enjoyed for a long time. Now, again, political stability wise, if you look at all the drastic shifts, especially in the Middle East, political instability in some countries like the Middle East, Venezuela, etc., have affected business operations and affected the supply of very essential components like energy components. In the case of Taiwan, Taiwan's semiconductors have been affected. You've got supply of lithium, which is affected because the supply is torn from South America and such like, and even other force majeure scenarios like a ship getting stuck in the Suez Canal has caused lot of grief for a variety of sectors, including shipping, which is part of the logistics arm of worldwide product delivery. So, a lot of factors alongside these can help you understand how to manage VUCA factors. We are talking about political stability here. So, political stability also has a major role to play in how well businesses are able to manage their delivery supply chain costs and delivery timelines. Economically speaking, if you see the influence of economic growth rates on business opportunities, for example, India's rapid growth is attracting FDI. India is growing at that regular rough 8% clip, year on year and is the fastest growing large economy today on the planet. And in terms of inflation rates, what kind of high inflation is causing people the inability to buy power and various other daily consumables, etc. And Zimbabwe's hyperinflation is one such stark example of how things can quickly spiral out of control. In terms of exchange rates, you can actually notice how fluctuations in currency exchange rates affect international trade because of walking out of the European Union, which is known better as Brexit. The Great Britain pound actually faced a lot of volatility because they moved away from the euro. Now, in fact, other European countries are also at times contemplating doing similar actions, and it may have impacts very, very clearly and quickly on their individual currencies should they move out of the euro arrangement. If that happens, then are they fiscally strong enough to manage their financial affairs is something which the country's economists need to think of. Social factors wise, demographic changes, aging populations, for example, Japan influences the actual pressure on healthcare and retirement markets. In fact, in China, with their one child policy for a long, long time, today the average working age of the Chinese individual has gone up to somewhere in the 40s. And with a one child policy and with late marriages and lesser children coming up, their population is on the decline and the load on each individual to care for two prior level parents is increasing. So, that has had a very adverse effect on the infrastructural requirements not being met in China. There are ghost cities over there which are not getting filled up, and a lot of factors like these come into play when you look at macroeconomic factors. So, then you need to, as marketers, consider all these aspects in terms of econometrics and how social factors affect the economics of a particular nation or a particular economy. Again, lifestyle changes. Currently, you see a health consciousness booming across the world, and the fitness industry has been the beneficiary of it. So, all of these things are also questions which businesses must solve at their end and look and see how much of it is viable for them to actually milk for what it is worth. Then, culturally, how cultural shifts towards sustainability are driving eco-friendly products. The talk is heavy today. Earlier it was about EVs, but lithium is equally polluting to the environment, maybe more so than fossil fuels. So, maybe people would want to move towards hydrogen fuel cells, and that becomes another consideration. If there are enough people demanding for it, then it suddenly makes the creation of a hydrogen fuel cell based automotive industry that much more cheaper, because the cost of the research must therefore be amortized across the production. So, if there is a certain cost to the research and that being produced mass and across economies will give a quick reimbursement for whosoever does the investment towards the research aspect. So, everything is pushed by demand and supply, and that is typically where you need to figure out aspects of how culturally certain things are again pushed in other spheres like economics. So, there are linkages. These linkages are for organizations to keep an eye on and constantly be on the lookout for. Technologically speaking, the rise of AI and automation has transformed a variety of industries. Increased R&D in tech companies is driving product innovation, and digital transformation is actually changing how various aspects of human commerce are changing. Earlier, mom and pop shops have given way to e-commerce now, and earlier formats of one-day service or two-day service in terms of what Amazon was able to do is now seeing a shift to how 10-minute services are happening from a Zepto, Blinkit and Swiggy, etc. So, therefore, you see a drastic shift of this variety coming to fruition in the market out there. So, you need to be wary of the shifts that are happening and how technology is outpacing the speed of change which people can adapt towards well. Environmentally speaking, you would have seen very drastic changes in climate, and these may actually affect and bring about certain new product requirements. So, there could be demand for smoke and particle removers in north of India, which faces a lot of pollution during the onset of the winter months. And then how do you actually ensure that you sustain your economies? So, circular economy thought processes will definitely affect the fashion industry going forward, and all these factors need to be thought through by businesses who are building their input and output facets very strongly. Again, regulations like Green Tribunal in India, for example, is very strict, and it affects the functioning of an industry or businesses which follow that particular norm set in the country. And I am sure there are enough and more such circumstances internationally speaking as well. Carbon credits have become very increasingly important. India, in fact, wants to go carbon neutral, maybe even carbon negative by a certain 2070 is when they have set a date for, because we are still a growing and developing economy, and we cannot be taking the load that has been shoved upon us by developed nations, especially from the West. Now, there are legal factors finally which must be also kept in mind. Here, there are a lot of factors including laws and regulations that businesses must comply with and actually ensure they enforce in their operating regions. So, employment wise, there are laws where, especially in the West, this is highly developed. Minimum wage laws exist and they affect labor costs. In the developing world or in areas where there are lesser conformance issues, these labor laws are not that strict, but in countries where you've got a very strict regime, you will find that wage laws are very strictly enforced as well. So, consumer protection laws also exist here, and the regulations which ensure product safety and consumer rights are again very strictly enforced. Again, in countries which are coming up with things which they have invented or researched and brought into being, intellectual property laws become very critical for organizations and the countries which have these innovators from their midst to protect them, and they do these through innovations and patents, and which is crucial especially for tech companies, because that is where the maximum rate of innovation is happening, the speed of it is happening, and the systemic change that it can bring about is also to be seen exactly there. So, hence innovations and patents in tech companies, even pharma and life sciences are companies where you will see a lot of intellectual property being considered. So, these are aspects that businesses must keep in mind, because at the end of the day, these intellectual properties which they develop are what will fund the next layer of a round of research and also fuel their growth going forward. Beyond this, we will just integrate all that we have understood about the pestle scenario, and this is typically what you need to understand, that how big businesses integrate the pestle analysis into their strategic planning processes. Why? Because of all the individual segments that must be kept in mind to introduce certain features that keep the limited exposure towards outside forces, and if you have thought these things through, then you might actually turn certain scenarios into opportunities as well, and that is where the approach part of it comes in. So, there are multiple real world examples of companies which have successfully used pestle and adapted their strategies. For example, Apple assesses global market conditions for where they should be launching what particular product, where will they find the maximum acceptance, and they have in fact tweaked products also. So, India is probably one market where the Apple iPhone, alongside its main offering, has seen a C version, an SE version, and each of these have found a large enough and viable enough market consumer segment. Yes, over time they have made it very simple and they are now going with the regular and the Pro Max, right up to the Pro Max version. So, this is where it is currently stuck at. But in the past, India has been a test market for where they have launched separate segments of their main flagship products and they have found sufficient amount of traction. So, all of these things are there which help by Pestle allows organizations to craft their marketing, sales and product strategies as well. So, in terms of what it holds for the future, organizations need to encourage continual monitoring of pestle factors and stay adaptive, nimble, quick to react and quick to assess threats before they become large enough that they become actually unmanageable, so that they can stay competitive and because we know the VUCA world is not going away anytime soon. So, with that we come to an end of our conversation. Small caselet before we push off. Tesla is one very, very bright example. Politically speaking, in terms of government incentives for electric vehicles, they have lobbied and kept their space very, very high up. In terms of economic considerations, they have ensured that they have market demand for sustainable energy solutions even within the public outcry, so that they are able to push their products out there. Socially speaking, they have increased consumer preference for eco-friendly products, so that their products and output finds acceptance. Technologically speaking, they have made all the advancements in battery technology and autonomous driving, and environmentally speaking, they are reducing carbon emissions in a very, very drastic way. Probably they are the forerunners in that particular space. Legally, they ensure compliance with international safety and environmental regulations, and hence they are not present currently in every single country around the world. They have kept it limited to particular geographies they can manage and where their compliances are absolutely up to scratch. So, what does Pestle do finally? It provides a holistic understanding of the external environment. It identifies potential threats and opportunities, aligns your business strategies with external conditions. And one small example is how Starbucks use Pestle analysis to stay ahead of market trends and regulatory changes across the world. So, you can see in our conversation today, Maybank, the case study we took up first, has had strategic success which can be attributed to its comprehensive use of the Pestle analysis model. Whilst they were founded in 1960, they have become a financial powerhouse, and with a global presence, they have established a lot of segments which they cater to. Politically, regulatory support has aided in its expansion. Economically, growth in Southeast Asia has boosted demands for its services. Socially, they have mapped demographic shifts like aging populations and increased financial literacy and influenced their product offerings. Technologically speaking, they have driven consumer engagement through digital platforms, and environmentally speaking, they have promoted sustainability with products like green loans. Legally, it ensures compliance with international regulations. So, Maybank adapted to these external factors and solidified its leadership stance in the financial sector. Tesla, we have again discussed why across all these factors they have been very, very successful. So, with that, we will take up the last part of understanding models next time in our conversation, and this will conclude our mini segment on this particular subject. Thank you for being an awesome audience, and I'll see you next time.
Hello and welcome to this piece of literary snippet. We usually know William Shakespeare as the most revered figure in the history of English literature. But we often tend to forget that he has also been one of the most hated figures in literature. And here I'm not talking only about those boys and girls who have to memorize long sections from Macbeth or King Lear or Julius Caesar before they can go and sit for their school or college exams. But I'm also talking about people who are themselves quite famous authors. Tolstoy, for instance, considered the writings of Shakespeare to be, and I quote, crude, immoral, vulgar, and senseless. George Bernard Shaw absolutely loathed Shakespeare, as he did Homer. But perhaps no other criticism about Shakespeare is more damaging than the one which says that Shakespeare is a marvelous storyteller, provided someone has told him the story earlier. Now, this piece of criticism is particularly damaging because it is true. None of Shakespeare's plays contain any original story whatsoever. They are all written using pre-existing materials, pre-existing stories. Now, does that diminish the stature of Shakespeare as a dramatist? Well, I'll leave that for you to decide. See you in the next episode of Literary Snippets.